Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
We are
Hi.
here again. Did you miss
Wow.
us?
This
It's
is
new
yeah,
series time. It's new series time, isn't it?
kicking off.
Yeah.
Hurrah.
Mhm.
Right. So to kick off our new series on people we should have heard of in history, Philippa is going to talk to us about the amazing Aethelflaed, which is also mine and Philippa's cue to tell you to watch The Last Kingdom. You'll thank us for it later.
Yes, absolutely. If you haven't seen it,
There's
thanks
things in there that make us all unnecessary. And before we get all unnecessary, Kat, you should probably do the disclaimer.
Yes, I mean, before you go all about fluffy about the gills. Hello, friends. Welcome to History After Dark. We named that for a variety of reasons. I've discussed them at length, but principal amongst them, this is a place where we let our freak flags fly, where we do a bit of swearing, indulge in our love of the four-letter expletives, some innuendo, general filth, smut, depravity. It's a good time. If you are in an open plan office with a judgmental boss, this is the time to put a headphone in. If you are in a helicopter, a plane, a microlight with a small child, show us your mugs. The child is called Timmy. Timmy is a problem. Delightful, lovely,
nice
So-
mugs, Catherine.
nice mug, nice jugs. Timmy's a problem. Timmy is the sort of child that hears one depraved thing, one solitary time, locks it away in his mind palace, takes it to school with him, repeats it in front of his teacher. In my head is Miss Honey. Miss Honey does not watch History After Dark, so she's broken the first cardinal rule of History After Dark, which is if you don't know what a thing means, don't Google it. It's not for you. That's fine. Not everything is for everyone, but she Googles it, and before you know it, Miss Honey is curled up in a fetal position in the corner of the room, non-verbal. You've been called at school. You're going to have to answer questions with safeguarding and possibly the police as to why Timmy knows this thing. And you're also on the hook for however many weeks therapy it's going to take to get Miss Honey to be vertical again and verbal, which is apparently vital when you are teaching primary school. Put a headphone in. It's clear, I think, from what I've just said, what this is about, the sort of content we're going to have here. So at no point do I want to see in any comment sections, oh, I very much enjoy History After Dark, but I really wish you wouldn't swear. It's frightfully unladylike. We know what you're doing, and we're not going to buy it. We know you want us to pin that little comment right up at the top there so that people can come in and make fun of you, because that's your kink. And I won't shame you for your kinks. They will, but I won't. But what I will shame you for is for trying to engage us in kink without consent. That's not okay. Look, if you want to be tied up by your ponytail from the ceiling while somebody whips your testicles with a egg beater, that's fine. I've got a Brighton basement. My friend Shanique was down there. She's a great girl. She has white clean clothing. You need to pay for her wipe clean clothing, and also she does have to get a different egg beater for every client because that's just sanitary.
Hygiene.
So she needs
Yeah.
she's got to be hygienic. She needs a new egg beater, so you've got to pay for that. But you know what? You pay your money and you take your choice. This is never going to be approved as a drinking game, but you're grown-ups. My God, I hope you're grown-ups after that. So you can decide if you want to drink along. We aren't approving that message. This will never be medical nor legal advice. Please do not sue. This is History After Dark. Let's talk about that Mercian queen.
I have a quick question.
Quick
Do you think you can buy egg beaters in bulk to save money?
She
Because
does,
I
yeah.
wouldn't think you
Or
could.
Lakeland.
It's not the sort of thing
Yeah.
you would normally buy multiples of, is it?
I bet
No,
she's got a
she has
Lakeland
got-
account.
And she's also got a Costco card. So she's
Oh,
she's
right,
stocked
okay.
up. She's good.
Yeah.
Other stores are available. So she's egg beated. She's got lots of storage. She's good.
She's a
Good times.
She's
I was
fun.
just checking. If not, we could have like a crowd fund for her or something.
No, do you know what? She earns a good living, Shaniqua.
paid well.
I should
she's
hope
good
she
at what she
does.
does.
Kumquats aren't cheap either, or arse gnomes.
No.
Anyway, Aethelflaed.
Oh, Aethelflaed would be so proud of us right now. I have been waiting to speak to you about Aethelflaed, or the opportunity to speak about Aethelflaed for ages. So I was very excited that we can get this in and that we're kicking off our series with her. She was for anyone who doesn't know, she was a 9th century princess of Wessex. And she became, and we'll go into this obviously in more detail, the sole ruler of the neighbouring kingdom of Mercia. So this is a time before England is a combined political land mass, if you like. So you might have heard of her as the Lady of the Mercians. The Victorians Latinized her name, as they did with sort of
Everything.
Boadicea, Boudica, to Aethelflaed, which I don't think is much better. Like I don't know what the point of changing is anyway. But so if you've ever been to Worcester Cathedral, there is a stained glass window, and it's Aethelflaed underneath her depiction, which is Aethelflaed. She, as Catherine has already alluded to, was a character very nicely portrayed, brilliantly portrayed by Millie Brady in The Last Kingdom. And again, if you haven't watched The Last Kingdom, you're welcome. Just enjoy, but you would enjoy. I think you'll enjoy Aethelflaed's depiction in that series. I've already mentioned Boudica. If you sort of think Boudica is an impressive female in sort of a male violent age, then Aethelflaed, you're going to absolutely adore Aethelflaed. She is a proper hero. She, throughout her life, demonstrated military, political leadership. She definitely was active in a male dominated environment, but we'll get into that because it is male dominated. But anyway, we'll get into that because it's not exactly like females are sort of empowered now and therefore in the past it get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. History doesn't quite work like that, so we'll talk about that. But she's absolutely remarkable, and also her legacy in terms of, so not just in her life, but her legacy in terms of the creation of England and the prevention of a complete Danish takeover, which I don't think is maybe appreciated unless you've really got into Anglo-Saxon history, just how close England was to just becoming part of Scandinavia. So her actions and her legacy are major in a major influence on the formation of England and the prevention of a whole-scale Danish takeover. So she was, to put her into context, so she was the daughter of Alfred, known to history as Alfred the Great. He was Alfred of Wessex, and we did a two-parter on Alfred.
He's so great.
In History Heroes. He was so great. He got 2 episodes. So it would be worth your while, I think, going back and watching the episodes about Alfred. But so Aethelflaed was the daughter of Alfred and his wife Aelfrith. She was born around about we think 869, 870 AD. She was their eldest child, and her mother Aelfrith actually came from Mercia. So her father's Wessex and her mother is from Mercia. Her mother was the daughter of a Lord Aethelred Mughal. I'll warn you, there's a few Ethelreds, and seeing as we've done Ethelred recently, but this is another. It's another popular name. So anyway, she's the daughter of a Lord Aethelred Mughal, who there's a number of candidates as to who he could actually be. One of them is a Lord of the Gaini, which are one of the oldest groups of Saxon Mercia. Possibly lend their name to Gainsborough, the place.
Oh.
Yeah. So either way, whoever is her actual father, she's clearly from noble enough birth to wed an heir to the throne of Wessex. When she marries Alfred, he's not king, but he is in the line. So when they marry, Alfred's older brother Ethelred, another one, is on the throne of Wessex. They married in 868. That's why we think Aethelflaed's, or it's thought that Aethelflaed's birth date would have been within the first couple of years of their marriage, hence 869, 870. She was possibly born at the royal palace at Chippenham in Wiltshire, which is within Wessex but close to the border of Mercia. And she had 4 siblings. So the Alfred and Aelfrith would have 5 children who would reach adulthood. So Aethelflaed, then a boy, Edward, who becomes Alfred's successor, and we've referred to him, I think, a bit in the past. He's Edward the Elder. He'll become known as, because there was another Edward the Martyr. It's just to distinguish him, because they weren't using numbers. Then a daughter, Elfgifu. If anyone's looking for baby names, by the way, this is full of them. I would love someone to be using old Anglo-Saxon names now. Aethelflaed, Elspeth. Anyway, yeah, Elfgifu.
Elspeth's a great name, particularly. Elspeth's a great name.
Love it. Elfrith was another daughter. She went on to marry Baldwin, the Count of Flanders, and there was another son, Aethelwald, who's born around 880. I'm not sure what his fate was, but anyway, he lives to adulthood, but I'm not sure what happens after that.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do we know, because there's a lot of Ethel going on?
Yes.
Ethelworld.
Yes.
Does the word Ethel have a meaning?
Yes. So so it means throne worthy.
Basically. Oh, okay.
They are the Aethelings, and we see this
used.
we see this reinvigorated in the time of, was it Henry I, who makes his son, he basically has him sort of semi-crowned William the Aetheling.
Yeah.
Of course.
So it means throne worthy. So at this time,
almost like she's Princess Flade.
Sorry, say again.
So is Aethelflaed like Princess Fled then?
Sort of. I think her name, actually, there is a meaning to her name. Like when we had Aethelred means well counselled. They have meanings as well. And I can't remember what Aethelflaed's name means. It's something beautiful or something like that. I'm not quite sure. Yeah. They all mean sort of throne worthy. And you know, at this time you've got I might be talking about this later, but I'll mention it now. The Witan, which everyone's probably heard of, the Witan or Witanagon, which is the meeting of elders. So the wise men, the people with most experience, etc. And we know that people have probably heard that they choose the next sort of king. They do, but it's from a very already small and defined pot. Yeah. That are generally, our blood relatives of the previous king. So it's sort of, in theory, they just elect the best person for the job, but out of this very small, it's a bit like what we do now. Small pool of candidates.
They've all gone to Oxford and Eton, those ones.
And probably aren't the best person for the job.
No. Well, that requirement, I think, went out the window quite a while ago. So at the time of Aethelflaed's birth, Alfred, her father, was probably away fighting with his brother King Ethelred, and because there was there were Viking invasions, and we talked a lot about this when we talked about Alfred, but the Viking threat had changed around this time. So instead of raids that were kind of annoying, obviously, and frequent, but they were incursions. They were to come in, steal, leave, and then you might get more because there's churches and there's these places that are full of gold and whatever. So you can go in, you can steal stuff, and you can take it home and enjoy your proceeds. But the threat from the Viking invaders had changed. By this point, they're actually looking to settle. So they're not just coming to steal and leave. They're looking to actually come and take land. So the campaign required against them is becoming more frequent. It has to be more sustained. The Vikings are staying for longer. Now, Alfred's brother Ethelred, the King Ethelred, dies in April 871. He has got 2 surviving sons, and they are both Aethelings. But Alfred succeeds them. He succeeds his brother above the 2 boys. And so that's and so Alfred's accession unlikely to have been contested by the Witan, probably approved, well, would have been approved by the Witan. You're in the midst of a Danish invasion, and it's not the time to get precious about primogeniture. And actually, it's not like we're not post-Norman conquest where primogeniture is like, the thing. So anyway, so we've got the best man for the job, and again, watch our Alfred episodes to learn more about what he does. But he's Alfred's often regarded as one of England's greatest monarchs because of his military victories against the Viking invasions, his reform of English law, his efforts to promote. He was a big promoter of education and literacy as well. Big promoter of education and literacy. So Aethelflaed benefited greatly from her father's attitude towards receiving a good education. She would have received a very good education. And growing up in the royal court of Wessex at this time of all these this Viking attempted takeover, basically, she would have also been exposed to politics, to diplomacy, to negotiations between different powerful men about what they're going to do, what positions, responsibilities they're each going to take, and of course just overall warfare. She's exposed to all of this from a young age, and we can surmise that likely shapes her own approach when she becomes a leader later in life. When you might remember the story of when Alfred has to flee to the Isle of Athelney, which is it's like an isolated island. It's in the middle of the Somerset marshlands, so it's not an island sort of out to sea. It is within land, but it's surrounded by marshland. And this is the one, if anyone's heard of the legend of him burning the cakes, that's where this is this time where basically the royal court was at Chippenham on the Christmas, I think from 877 to 878. So and the Vikings led by, or a Viking contingent led by a man called Guthrum, had been, so usually raiding season stops in the winter. Everyone has a break. It's no good for anyone to raid in the winter because it's, food is scarce. So you've got to feed your horses. You haven't got, basically it's stopped. But what Guthrum had decided to do is launch an attack when they least expected it. And he launched the attack on the royal court while they're at Chippenham, still there following the Christmas celebrations. And Aethelflaed is around about 8 years old at this time. So they've been at Chippenham enjoying Christmas, food aplenty, I imagine. Everything's very comfortable. They're warm. They've got whatever they drink. I was going to say water, but they don't. And then Guthrum and his party attack, and they flee. So we know about Alfred fleeing, but actually his whole family goes with him, and whoever could escape from the court. So they've literally been thrust in the middle of winter into what's effectively a military camp. And her father and the small group that have managed to escape with them have to launch surprise raids on Viking settlements, native settlements, doesn't matter. They're out trying to get food, basically. So, and from here also, Alfred begins to plan and prepare for a reprise attack. So she's been around the court and seen and heard whatever she could have heard by being at court. Now she's literally in the field, preparing for battle. Not her personally, but she's seeing it all happen around her. Because the neighbouring kingdom of Mercia, which is the area in which I live and might just about stretch down to where Kat lives, that had been the dominant, largest kingdom in sort of the century before. But by this point, it's been mainly consumed by the Vikings. This is where you might have heard of the Dane law. So this is the part of the country which is administered, which is basically ruled by different factions, different groups, but Danish. So it's very probable at this point that Wessex is going to go the same way. They're just going to keep going. They're just going to keep going and keep going until they've taken over the entire, what we would call England. But Alfred is tenacious. Alfred does not give up. He never gives up. That's one of the things that people remember about his character. So, and against the flow, he beats the Danes at the Battle of Edington in the May of 878. Alfred, as well, and another thing that people might know of him, and especially if you watch the Last Kingdom, this comes across very much, is he's incredibly pious. And I mean, he's actually been to Rome twice, which is incredible. Once as a 5-year-old, and I think he went to like under the age of 10, he'd been to Rome twice and met the Pope. So undergone some sort of ceremony. Anyway, he is all in with this, with God. And God has turned out for him, because completely against the flow, he's won this battle. And so impressed, maybe fearful, is King Guthrum, or we think that he's referred to as a king by his own people. So impressed is Guthrum by this Christian God that following the peace agreement that comes after the battle, he agrees to be baptized. And Guthrum is actually baptized as a Christian. He takes the name Aethelstan, later having coins minted with that name. So we know he's done that. So, but that's one victory. But Alfred's reign is dominated by Viking raids, excuse me. And then, so he wins, he loses, but through sort of shows of force, acts of diplomacy, we know he pays them off sometimes with the Danegeld. But he does manage to keep Wessex as a separate kingdom. He manages to keep it. So, as well as seeing the realities of this ongoing heathen, which means non-Christian threat, Aethelflaed would have also been aware that her father developed a chain of fortified towns, which again we spoke about. They're referred to as boroughs or boroughs. These fortified settlements lay within a day's travel of the next. So the idea being, obviously, you can get from one to another if needed. And they were manned by a permanent garrison, which was in turn made up from a standing army, which would be rotated. So some might be on campaign against the Vikings, some would be stationed at a burh. Actually, Alfred had possibly got that idea from the Danes. They'd got 5 burhs, which they'd done for this exact reason. Derby, Leicester, Derby's a Viking name, Derby, Leicester, Lincoln, Nottingham, Stamford. So he's probably taken that idea of the closeness from them. But actually, there've been fortified towns from the time, at least from Offa of Mercia, Offa of Dyke fame. Offa's Dyke. I'm not being rude. So he's basically taken this sort of best practice and he's put it into these best practice ideas, and he's put it into a reality in his kingdom. He also utilizes horses, excuse me, which apparently wasn't much done before that, for the actual army, to make them more mobile and able to move quicker. So so you've got these burhs, which is where we have a lot of place names with borough, bury, burr on the end. A lot of them were established in old Roman towns or cities because they could use the stone walls that were already there to at least be a very good starting point for their defences. So with the development of the burhs, we see the first sort of large-scale urbanisation. We see street plans come out. Again, a lot of them are mapped out along the old Roman ones. There's a tendency as well to decide to set these up along the old Roman road networks, which makes sense because you can move easier through the old Roman road network, probably known as well. So this is significant because Aethelflaed will follow on from her father. So she must have been taking notice and develops more burrs once she goes to Mercia. When Alfred wins at Edington against the Danes, it's not only Guthrum that he has impressed. He many of the smaller kingdoms, because we're made of lots of smaller kingdoms, and in Wales as well, not just in England, they begin to come to Alfred and submit to him as their sort of overlord. They want his protection, they want his assistance. In Wales, they're having a lot of pressure from the Danes that are coming through Mercia. You've got also other Welsh kingdoms putting pressure on the smaller ones. So they all want Alfred's protection. And one of them, the ruler of what's left of Mercia, it's a bit of a rump of Mercia left at this time in the western region. So it's along the Welsh border. It's where I live. Kind of Worcestershire, Shropshire, Gloucestershire, that kind of area. You've got a rump. Maybe not Gloucestershire, but anyway, he's ruling that. His name is Ethelred. I'm so sorry, but the Lord of Mercia is Ethelred, and he also submits to Alfred. So the Lord of Mercia could have been a king, maybe was referred to as a king by his own people, but he submits to Alfred, which is probably why you don't hear of him referred to a king, because the sources for this time period are heavily around the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, which is a Wessex-based source. Anyway, so there's all these things. Anyway, but Lord Ethelred, he submits to Alfred, but he becomes one of his closest military allies. He's certainly the ruler of Mercia. He's on a charter from 883 granting privileges to Berkeley Abbey in Gloucestershire. Also Gloucestershire, yeah, I was right. The same charter mentions that the privileges are given to Berkeley Abbey by Lord Ethelred, but with the assent of Alfred and his witan. So he's described as an ealdorman. He's on charters, but yeah, either way, he's ruling Mercia. He became the ruler of Mercia in about 880 on the death of King Ceolwulf from and he so sorry, but we don't really know how he came to power. I don't know if he's related to Ceolwulf or how that's happened. Either way, Lord Ethelred and King Alfred share this common goal, which is to take land back from the Vikings. Like I say, Mercia, the Mercia that Lord Ethelred is ruling over is a rump compared to what it was. I mean, Mercia stretched from coast to coast and down into London. It was, well, not coast to coast quite, the Welsh border to the coast, and it was the biggest kingdom. So London actually came into Mercia, and we know that because coins were minted there, they were struck there. But now Mercia is a sub-kingdom of Alfred, and this is secured. Oh, sorry, no, I've missed a bit out. So the London had been lost to the Vikings at one point. It sort of goes to and fro over the next sort of century or whatever. But in 886, Mercia and Wessex, so Alfred and Ethelred, launch an attack and they take back London. And Alfred, even though it was an old Mercian land, it's Alfred who grants it to Ethelred. So it's very much, we know what the hierarchy is here. And that alliance between Alfred and Ethelred is sealed by a wedding between Alfred's daughter Aethelflaed and Lord Ethelred. So this is how Aethelflaed becomes the Lady of the Mercians. She marries Lord Ethelred. And we know they were married sometime between 882 and 887. That is a 5-year window. But and that actually means that, assuming her birth date of around 870, she could have been as young as 12 or 13 when she's married, no older than 18. He's definitely older. We're not quite sure how much older, but he's already got a track record of commanding armies, witnessing charters. He's certainly reached adulthood by 880 when he becomes king of or Lord of Mercia. So he's definitely older, but we're not sure by how much. And it's possible that the gift of London from Alfred to Ethelred is sort of a wedding gift. It's a roundabout. So it depends. This is how we sort of try and guess when they were married.
That's quite a gift.
It's quite a gift, and it would. But and if I kind of like the idea that it was, because it puts it later. It puts it slightly later, which means Aethelflaed would have been slightly older when she got married. But it is very likely the couple were familiar with each other already. Ethelred had by this point been by Alfred's side a lot, and probably at court a lot. And also, it is a political match, obviously, but as political matches go, it's not too bad. She already knows him, probably. She speaks the same language as him. She'll be moving away, but really not that far. And culturally, linguistically, they're all similar. So, it's not too bad. So Ethelred and Aethelflaed, Ethelred and Aethelflaed, the new couple, set up their principal residences are sort of in the southwest of the Mercian kingdom. So actually quite an easy ride back to Wessex. And they have a daughter called Aelfwine. We don't know when she was born, but we assume again that it was quite early in the marriage, which is why I prefer if she was a bit older. But whatever the case, it's actually their only child. They only have one daughter, Aelfwine. And William of Malmesbury, who was a 12th century chronicler, tells us that the birth was so difficult that Aethelflaed abstained from sex with her husband ever again for the fear of having to give birth again.
Wow.
So we don't really know. We don't really know why they don't have any more children, but it does appear that Aethelflaed makes that decision that she's not going to have any more children. But that wouldn't be Ethelwyn isn't going to be the only child at the court. Her brother Edward, the elder, has a son, and he's sent by Alfred to the Mercian court to be educated. That's Ethelstan, which I think we did mention at some point. He's the king who actually is the first king to preside over the entirety of a combined England. So it's Alfred's grandson who actually ends up doing it. But anyway, so they are but it's quite interesting to think that Athelstan, who is that figure, is raised by his aunt Aethelflaed, because he needs all of this. He's going to need military might, a good education. He needs the lot, and he gets it at the Mercian court. So Ethelred remains important in terms of the Viking resistance. He's often campaigning with Alfred and Edward the Elder. But it appears that the couple get along well, and she's often on campaign with them, with him, with her father, with her brother as well. But in 902, Ethelred's health begins to falter, and Aethelflaed takes a lead in running Mercia. So before I delve into Aethelflaed's sort of achievements, I alluded to this before, but I think it's important to try and give some context around the role of women in Anglo-Saxon society, at this point in Anglo-Saxon society. I should start by saying it depends on what class you are. So we're clearly talking about royalty. Okay, that's very different to there was slavery in England at this time. Very different to that. Very different to your sort of land workers, your peasants, and then free people. But anyway, so let's look at royalty. And so the majority of women aren't going to be involved in political or certainly not military arenas. But noble women actually are, from royal or elite families, often did play quite significant roles in both those things, maybe as a slightly behind the scenes or tactical, whatever. They were involved, and they could also wield power through their familial connections. They could inherit property. Women could inherit property and manage estates. The church actually also at this point, I should say, is a route for female power. Abbesses are on a par with the power of abbots. So the women have got some options. The law most certainly protects and respects women at this point. They're allowed to own and keep their own possessions and land even when they're married, which doesn't happen later on. But there's this was interesting. I found this out. So marriage between rival factions. So political marriages, pledges of peace often came with a marriage. And at this point, there's actually an Old English word for a bride in these circumstances. And I'm not sure quite how to pronounce it. Something like Weber. It means peace weaver. So there's actually a term for a bride for these sorts of political matches. That's kind of by the by, because Aethelflaed seems to be quite happy in her marriage. But it was clearly a pact, of loyalty and this combined power of Mercia and Wessex. So in Mercia, there was also a difference between the kingdoms and women's roles. Mercia, particularly, it wasn't unknown for women to wield power. King Offa, who I mentioned before, his wife, Cainthryth, was given the title of queen. She was regularly witnessing charters. There were coins struck in her name. That happened multiple times of the king's wives in between Offa and Aethelflaed's own uncle, Burgred, who was king and had married Alfred's sister. It gets a bit complicated. So, but her aunt effectively seemed to have taken quite an active role as well. In contrast, I'll tell you this story because I think it's interesting. Maybe we can discuss it. In Wessex, in contrast, the land obviously of Aethelflaed's birth, women had not witnessed charters for quite a while. They hadn't even been given the title queen. So Alfred's wife, Elspeth, isn't queen. She doesn't sit on a throne next to him. And we're told that this is a result of King Offa's daughter, Edbur, who had been married to the King of Wessex. Asa, who is Alfred's biographer, says that she basically, clearly he doesn't like her because she comes down to Wessex as tyrannical as her father, so clearly doesn't like her father either, and starts whispering in her husband's ear that his friends are treacherous, his supporters are treacherous, they're going to kill him. And she basically gets people killed by doing this. And if her husband doesn't oblige, she takes matters into her own hands and gets rid of them herself. And this inevitably leads to a mistake where the poisoned porridge, which was intended for whoever it was supposed to be for, her husband, King Beorhtric, eats the poisoned porridge instead and dies. So this is very bad. So she flees to Francia and the court of Charlemagne. Charlemagne, who actually had been a good king, well, apparently a good king, great king, but had that's his name, that's what it means. But had been great friends with her father, Offa. But anyway, so she'd escaped to his court. He sets her up as an abbess. Then she's found in debauchery with an Englishman.
Debauchery.
Debauchery. Yeah, which is no good for an abbess or someone who's in exile, and apparently ends
you
ends
say
her
that
life.
it was rife.
It
Like
was.
the amount of bastard children in the abbeys and monasteries
from the women as well.
of
Yeah,
Europe.
yeah.
I mean, it's all over the shop. I think it was one of Edward I's daughters. Her name escapes me. She was a nun, and she ran up extraordinary gambling debts. Extraordinary gambling debts.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe they got bored. But yeah, apparently she ends up, you know, we're told, Asa tells us, you know, she ends up being a beggar in Italy. So, but this means that no woman is then trusted with the title queen, with the powers that came with it. She's not going to sit on the throne. She's not going to witness charters, whatever. And so that's the situation in Wessex. It's not the situation in Mercia, neighbouring Mercia, which is good for Mercia because Aethelflaed, she has political and military acumen. It sets her apart really as quite exceptional. And had they have not had her able to do that because she was somewhere where the fact that she was a woman meant she wouldn't be able to demonstrate those, I think that would have been, it's interesting how that might have affected history actually, because Aethelflaed appears to have been actively involved in ruling the kingdom alongside her husband. As I said, she's also a powerful symbol because she is the embodiment of that bond between the two kingdoms, between Mercia and Wessex. It's suggested credibly that she was probably at Aethelred's side on campaign, like I said, in the 890s. And when he becomes ill, that she actually starts to lead campaigns herself. So it's not unusual in Mercia for women to take political roles. It is actually quite unusual for them to take military roles. But anyway, she does do it. She personally leads her troops into battle. She commands the building and the defences of these key fortifications, these burhs that she's seen her father do across Wessex. She and her husband have started that in Mercia. And the first one that they created was Worcester, which I was very excited about because that's very, very close to me. That's the first burh that the couple develop sometime in the last some point in the last decade of the 9th century. Don't know exactly when. Again, it's an old Roman city, so they've used the same blueprint. Use an old Roman city. Use the walls, use the street plan, etc., etc. They're also responsible for Gloucester, rebuilding that, and they set up a They have a. I'm just trying to find the name of it. So just outside of the walls. I'm not clear about why this is outside of the walls, but they have a new Minster church built. There was one before, but it's become dilapidated. It's only small. It's about 120 feet long, but apparently lavishly decorated. And it's dedicated to St. Peter as it had been before it became dilapidated. But because of their patronage, it becomes the principal church of Mercia. And Gloucester becomes their capital, I should say, as well. At the same time, they build a wooden hall at a place called Kingsholm, and that becomes their main palace. So the main centre of government as well. And in 909, there is a joint campaign between Edward of Wessex, so her brother, and the Mercians, led by her husband and herself. And they go and assault the Danelaw. So they're not reacting anymore to Viking raids. They are taking the initiative as well. And they hit them for 5 weeks. And they managed to gain to get the remains of St. Oswald, who was a king of Northumbria. They seize them from Bardney Abbey in Lincolnshire. They bring them to Gloucester, They reinter them in the church of St. Peter, and then with that, they rededicate it to St. Oswald. And I'll come back to why St. Oswald's is important right at the end. We're nearly there. So they do these. They create these burrs. They're all over. I won't go through them all, but you've got places like I think they developed London again back into the city wall. So you've got London Vig, which I think is where Aldwych is now. That had become an Anglo-Saxon settlement, but with this development of burrs, they moved back into the Roman walls, which is why you get the city of London where it is now. They move it back. But Chester is another one. Runcorn, Tamworth, and so they've worked really well as a team. But Aethelflaed doesn't lose her role when her husband dies. He dies in 911. He's been ill before that, so it's likely she's actually started to take power, a leading role way before this, but it doesn't slow her down whatsoever. So she becomes de facto ruler of the kingdom. She takes control unopposed, which appears, that maybe that's because she's almost done that already. But there's no opposition when she does take full control, which is an indication of just how able and right she is for the role. The Viking threat it's not going away. So, but again, she is able to take offensive action, and I'm going to skip forward because I'm doing quite a bit. She leads so I mentioned Tamworth was one of the burrs. She sets that up in something like 911, 912. I can't quite remember. She leads from there. So these burrs, they're defensive, but I should mention they're also used to launch attacks from. She uses Tamworth to launch an attack on Derby in 917. And it's her most famous victory because she does see off the Danes. And the Danes now start to want to negotiate with her, and she's supposed to be, I think there's an agreement made in York. It's a significant blow to their presence in the Midlands, and it's a proper turning point, a real turning point in this struggle to keep England, and not to allow it to become all part of the Danelaw. But unfortunately, so she does that in 917. In June 918, she dies, and that leaves a power vacuum in Mercia. Now, although her daughter Elfwin had been named her successor, had been by her side, had the same education, for all we know, we don't really know much about her. Don't know if she's got the same sort of personality. Don't know if she's got the same sort of abilities. But she's quickly deposed by her uncle Edward, who's now, with the death of their father, he's king of Wessex, and she's taken to Wessex, and we don't really hear about her again. She might have been sent off to a nunnery. And with this, Edward becomes now king of Wessex and Mercia. So we've started to get the combination. So it's not very good for Elfwin, but in terms of combining lands under one ruler and the development of England eventually, that's where we start to see that. And the reason I wanted to mention St. Oswald's earlier is that is where Aethelflaed was buried, and her husband had also been buried there. And that is now a complete ruin, but her body may well be still on the site. Apparently, I was trying to find out if anyone knew, but they don't seem to know whether she's still there or she got moved. The Museum of Gloucester thinks they might have her tomb slab. Remember Ethelstan that was brought up, her nephew that was brought up with her under her sort of guardianship. He grants privileges to St. Oswald's and becomes a major benefactor of St. Oswald. So it's thought maybe he commissions these grave covers. But St Oswald's, it does actually still exist until the dissolution. It's dissolved in 1536 because it's quite a small monastery, so it's one of the first to go. But it is absolutely in the shadow of St Peter's Abbey, which we now know as Gloucester Cathedral. It's a few steps away from, and you can go and visit it now. It's almost like parkland that you can just go and wander around. It sort of managed to, well, it managed to survive as a parish church, but then unfortunately the Civil War, Cromwell managed to destroy it. So it's now sort of one wall and a little bit of jutty outy bits and a bit of stuff in the Museum of Gloucester. And yet that was the burial place of this incredible woman who may well still be lying in the grounds, which is what I find amazing. So she's someone who, like in The Last Kingdom, actually in The Last Kingdom, I was going to say she's overlooked, but actually The Last Kingdom, I think, did her quite a good service in terms of the storytelling. She is there, she's known. But I wonder whether coming between Alfred and Edward and then Athelstan, her role, although it's often mentioned, it's not given the gravitas that it actually, in reality, that her role had, because without her know-how, without her leadership, her bravery, clearly she was good at planning and strategy, and without that Derby, the victory at Derby, it's questionable whether we'd have got, well, history could have been very, very different. And so her impact is undeniable, really. And I just think she would have been another one who we'd have liked to have been friends with, or at least seen. She might have been quite scary, but to me, she comes across as somebody who, I don't know, again, like we've talked about before, maybe it's because I want to like her, but I imagine her as quite a feminine but strong person. In order to have kept power, I think she would have had to balance those things. People wanted to follow her, and she clearly was capable. So yeah, so that's Aethelflaed. Sorry, it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour through her life, but
with The Last Kingdom, obviously there's aesthetically pleasing elements to that, which is often why we recommend it. But I thought I really like, and again, it's historical fiction, so we're not quite sure. I thought I really loved her character in that, and also don't want to give too many spoilers, but what happened to her ultimately in that was extremely sad. But I thought she came across as a sort of a real, this is one of the difficult things. So sometimes badass women are sort of portrayed in ways that aren't always very positive, because they don't display any feminine traits, and that's what makes them so successful in women. Is, they're women because they don't act like women almost sometimes. That's what's made them successful, is because they do things in a man way. But although obviously she had to act in ways that were, I suppose, considered more comely of kings than queens, she did come across as somebody who was very independent and very wise, and a strong enough character to achieve that on her own, not just because of the circumstances she found herself in. And she is, like you say, someone that you would warm to and you would like to hang out with, and
she
didn't
certainly
maybe have the arrogance of some of her peers.
And she seems to have had this from the beginning. So there's a charter when I said they set up Worcester. They developed the burh at Worcester. The Priory Church, which is now Worcester Cathedral, was already there. And there's a charter where they basically write down how they're going to split the dues, the fees, the taxes, that kind of thing. And they're referred to as the Lords. She's on a par with her husband there and then. Now, whether that's because she's a princess of Wessex and Alfred wants to make clear to every avenue available to him that Wessex is dominant to Mercia, and therefore woman may she be, but she is Wessex to Mercia in this marriage. I don't know, but she's certainly being referred to as on a level footing with her husband from the beginning. And I would have thought if she wasn't up to that, we would have seen trouble for her at the point where her husband starts to get ill, and certainly when he dies, and yet she's still she's still heading campaigns and developments of burhs. So she seems very capable.
I don't know.
I think one of I was going to say, I think one of the issues that we have when it comes to, we talk about a lot, that sort of, never before has a woman ever been able to do this thing until this lady did, apart from all the other women that were also doing it. And I genuinely think it's because we misunderstand how much the education of a woman who is being raised to be a queen or to be an estate, the wife of an estate holder, how much her education would be transferable to military management. I think there is the old adage of it has to be a man ruling England because they have to be able to lead armies fundamentally forgets that there are two factors of warfare. And yeah, men do both. They do the strategy and the planning, and they do the fighting. But that last bit is impossible. And really and truly, that's the brute force strength stuff of it. The thing that wins the battle, arguably, is the strategy beforehand. And the notion that a woman who has been raised to, in her husband's absence, manage estates, people, to defend estates, people, to manage the money, the goods coming in and out, to care for the children. When her husband is away, or if she is widowed, she has to do all of that. And we're talking about many, in today's money, millions of pounds worth of people, supplies, buildings, etc. in sometimes a time of war. The notion that that individual can't transfer those skills to move men and horses for battle is delulu. It's the same skill.
They can. And the skill is what's important here. Like, I do think we have to be a bit careful because we are very focused on sex differences or they're not. It's not really wanting to think about sex differences. We want everyone to have opportunity and everyone this and that, and it's like we forget, or we don't know because we weren't there. But was it if you were good at what you were doing, that is the bit that was the most important bit.
Yeah.
We're very early on in Christianity at this time.
That's what I was just about to say. In where, although I think they'd converted to Christianity, hadn't they? Alfred
certainly was.
Certainly enough people around that hadn't, or were very new to it, and perhaps didn't quite hold the same attitudes about women, or women being in positions of power, or women being comparatively the weaker sex, perhaps in the same way.
I think they might have just stuck to literally physically weaker. Literally physically you're weaker, and therefore you don't fight in battle. Like as a logic. But like I'd mentioned earlier, abbesses had the same. They were the same. I don't want to say power, but you know what I mean. As abbots, they were equivalents. I wonder whether whether Elfwin's deposition by her uncle is more to do with combining the kingdoms as opposed to she can't possibly rule because she's a woman, whether it's like this is my opportunity, I am getting these two knitted together.
I mean, if he could have married her, then maybe that would have made sense. I think one of the reasons why Aethelflaed is able to do what she's able to do is because she has the marriage has already happened, and the marriage is powerful, and she is a representative. She's the peace weaver. She's also the power weaver. The other thing I always think is as well is when they talk about women didn't work until very recently. Women have always worked. Women have always worked since we have work, women have worked. And yes, maybe you might say, well, noble women don't work, royal women don't work. I would argue, nor do royal men, because having a job like the groom of the stool is not a fucking job. It's of no purpose. You join the king in the toilet.
It's like it's just being his gossip monkey. It's like there's nothing. Entertaining him on the toilet,
doing twirling about and dancing and being involved in joust. That's make work. It's not an actual job.
Well, but back to your point about managing estates. If they're managing estates, then actually that is working.
The women are doing the work. The men go off to court and leave their wives behind. The women are doing the work. Sorry.
The time where women didn't work. They just managed all of the land of England.
Yeah. Women have always worked.
Yeah. So I think she's such a candidate for, if you want a hero, a heroine, whether you use that word, or hero, then she is.
She's up there.
She is, a very, very strong candidate.
She's a double-hard bastard. And I love
she's
it.
a double-hard bastard. And she doesn't, we don't, in The Last Kingdom, they depict her dying of cancer, don't they? But I don't know that we know how she dies. She's a spoiler alert. Well,
it was very.
I've already spoiled most of it for you. So,
It was very sad, but they had one last little moment, didn't they?
Now she's spoiling it. Yeah, no. But yeah, she's fascinating, and it's St. Oswald's I find fascinating because I came across St. Oswald's before I knew the link to her. I didn't even know it was there. I was just having a little walk from the cathedral back. I was doing a long way round to where my car was parked, and came across this little. It's clearly an old priory, you can tell, but a small one, and then found out that it was actually Aethelflaed's burial place, and would have been the principal church of Mercia.
Amazing.
And now it sits in kind of a little parkland next to a ring road, which for anyone who doesn't know what a ring road is, just a road that goes around the city. It rings the city. So passed by God knows how many people every day.
That seems such a shame.
Yeah, it does.
Well, that's so much the point. That's so the thing that happens in this country. Like, I was down by the Elizabeth Line station at Liverpool Street, and just casually the signage on the wall, there was a massive mass burial right under here. One of the reasons why whenever they're building something in London and doing tube stuff in London, it always tends to take 5 years longer, because they dig down and rather than hitting oil, they just hit corpses. Just body. And they're like, oh, okay. Now we need to make sure these aren't recently dead. They're dead. And then the archaeologists, that's why archaeologists are part of my understanding is every building project that goes on, particularly in the city, the Mola are always there.
Yeah, they are. I think that's been for quite a while as well now, at least 20 years that I know of. That every time they do a development, they have to have
just everywhere.
So they just need to make sure they're dead enough. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
that was cool. Thanks, Philippa.
You're welcome.
So, Philippa, what's happening next week?
Next week, Kat is going to introduce us to a lady called, I've always struggled with this, but Licoricia.
Licoricia.
Oh, what I could just do. Yes. So, who I've not heard of before, so I'm looking forward to that.
Neither. No. Kat, tell us some things.
Yes, thank you. If you enjoy us as one of your 5 a day, then you can let us know by coming over to our Buy Me a Coffee. That's where you can get Winnebagos. It's www.buymeacoffee.com/had podcast. That's also, though, where you can go if you want to join our close friends. That's on Instagram. When you look at your Instagram, when you're at the first page, you've got the little circles with the icons of the people that you're mates with on there. And if it's got a green light around it, that means that you're somebody's close friend and they've put a message up in the close friends. And it's usually going to be Catherine, and she's found some depraved image from history or about a beaver, and it's gone in the close friends. Essentially, it's like being part of our WhatsApp group chat. You can see the brain farts that we have going on a regular basis. So if you want to come and join that, please do check us out over at Buy Me a Coffee. Also, we have got a Substack that is a place where you can come to check out this podcast. It's linked. Also, information about what's happening with stuff. That's historyafterdarkhub.substack.com. It's good to be signed up there, because I'm going to tell you now to subscribe to us here on YouTube, to hit the bell icon, and also select all in the drop down that will appear, because YouTube will allegedly update you. They don't, though. It's a goddamn lie. So the Substack is a place where you can come to be notified. Also, follow us on the Instagram and the TikTok, because there's notifications happening there. You'll find out the stuff's happening. Cover your bases, because YouTube will not tell you. It's very irritating. The Substack also will have links to our merch. We've got History After Dark merch. We've got Timmy is a Problem merch, Rough Beaver merch, Warboner merch, No Feet for Filling the Internet merch. All of your merch desires. Merch. Come check it out. And yes, please, when you are here, do comment. And also, if you, as well as a comment, put a string of emojis. The more you interact with this video, the more it gets shared out, and that helps people to find us. And you can also tell your mates about us, because let's be clear, if you're here, you've stayed this long, hour and nearly 7 minutes, we know what you are. You're one of us. Dirty. And the chances are, birds of a feather flock together. So the chances are, if you little filth pot, are still here, then you've got some filthy mates as well. So tell them about us
this evening, actually.
Hey, they stuck around because they were waiting. They were waiting for it to get really filthy.
Have we got the time to spoil it before we leave?
Need to insert some filth.
There we go, and we're there. Dig. Philippa, we've dragged you down to our level. That's what's happening.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, and you, Ollins, you've had your filth inserted, so that's what I'm going to say to you. Do we have any more? I
think we're good. We'll see you all next week.
All right. In which case, be good. And if you can't be good, be careful. And if you can't be careful, for the love of all that is holy, do not get caught. We're going to leave in 3, 2, 1. Bye!